Yes. Welcome in. It is Gridiron 360. I'm Bill. With me is Dave. Good morning, sir.
Morning, how we doing?
Good. So we are talking a recap of college football week 3. We previewed this week and weren't expecting much. But as always, when you don't expect much in college football, some crazy things tend to happen.
Yeah, and they did. That is for sure.
Great. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about what we saw out there this weekend. We'll start with our conference, the ACC.
Are you not feeling well, or is that your overall feeling towards that?
That's my overall feeling. You know, I'm a Clemson fan, and we held our own. There was obviously concern with our past couple-year history with Syracuse, especially going up to the Carrier Dome. No problems. I think I said last week the spread was 27.5. Thought that was astronomical, but I thought the week before against A&M, the 17, 18-point spread was astronomical. We pretty much covered it till Mercy touchdown at the end, put it right under at the 14. But I think I said last week going into this game that even though it was a high spread against Syracuse, I said, why not? Why not? Sure. And, well, 41-6, my friend. And one thing I've said on this cast before about my Tigers is, you know, we've seen it in past years. If the running game isn't working, the passing game is. If the passing game isn't working, the running game is. And we pick each other up until we get to November and that championship phase Coach Swinney has for us, and then it all comes together. I neglected to say there was one other piece because I thought that the running game did decent and the passing game did decent. Was it phenomenal? I mean, it wasn't phenomenal from the standard that we expect as Clemson fans. But one thing I neglected to bring up is that when neither of those are phenomenal, I forgot to say the defense picks us up because our defense was otherworldly. They said it in the cast. Herb Street said it. The Syracuse offensive line was just in disarray. They had no answers, and that kid was under duress. I don't know what we ended up with sacks-wise. I know like there was like 7 sacks by the time it was in the third quarter.
You ended up with 8.
So it was a masterful performance by Coach Brent Venables. He is the best D coordinator in college football. I'd love to argue with anyone on that. But yeah, masterful performance by our defense. And, you know, I know people are hating on Trevor Lawrence because he threw another pick or two or whatever. One of them was tipped up. One of them was disguised and was clearly his fault. You've said it before. I mean, this guy, you start to nitpick when you got a guy so good. And granted, he's maybe not performing to the level of Heisman candidacy. I really don't think that's really in his MO. I think he does not, the Heisman is not what he's worried about. He's worried about getting the team back to where we need to be. So we look good. The defense looked great. It made me feel real good. And, you know, the only thing that doesn't make me feel good, and I don't see anywhere we could take a loss, but it is 18 to 22-year-old guys that on any given Saturday things can happen.
Yep.
And if we do take that loss based on in the ACC, I know our past history should speak for itself, but this is not good for the ACC and not good for Clemson.
No.
What say you, sir?
Well, again, I think here. Let me kind of step back from the ACC a little bit, and then I'm going to slide right back into the ACC.
Slide it in.
When we talked about the games this week, and we've talked about these types of games, and there was a lot of games where there was big spreads, there was low expectation out of some of the opponents of some of the higher-ranked teams, and it's that damned if I do, damned if I don't scenario Clemson being one of the few games where, again, preseason, this had a little bit of hype around it. You know, the expectation for Syracuse to be a little bit stronger and maybe put up a fight. Coming off an A&M game, might be catching Clemson in a letdown. That didn't happen. This week was a week where a lot of teams and a lot of conferences and to be honest with you, the NCAA as a whole took a hit. It took a hit. I think overall, we what we were looking for coming into this year, I think the looking at the landscape of college football as a whole was, and we said this in previous podcasts, who was going to kind of step up and try to take the mantle from the top, 4 to 6 teams that everybody had earmarked for a shot at the playoffs. I think you hope that someone does that. You and I just talked off mic. Probably the only team I've seen that's kind of elevated their standing has been LSU to this point.
Yep.
Maybe even a Texas in that sense that it shows that they can be competitive with OU, and I certainly, as all signs point right now, would say that the winner of that Red River rivalry game will have a front row seat as long as they win out.
Yep.
I still think Texas has that shot, but other than that, really, it's been a lot of teams shooting themselves in the foot, and I don't think any conference did worse in that aspect than the ACC this week. Clemson stands alone. Yeah, you can get nitpicky. Wasn't the cleanest win, because Lawrence threw 2 picks. He also threw for almost 400 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to tell you that your backup quarterback apparently is horrid, 1 for 3 for -4 yards. I mean, you guys are screwed. I don't know what else to tell you.
Chase is awesome. He's really a good backup.
I mean, let's just touch some of these stats. There's no arguing the defense. 15 yards rushing, 172 through the air, less than 200 yards, and supposedly one of the better ACC matchups.
The defense played in their backfield the whole game.
Yeah. Oh, this was brutalization. 8 sacks, but at the same time, you want to sit here and pick apart Trevor Lawrence, and you can also say, hey, there was no sacks given up. He was effective with the ball. The plays and the time of possession were relatively close, and only because Clemson was able to score so much faster. Yeah. They put up 600+ yards, did it in the air, did it on the ground. This is a team that the biggest challenge Clemson has going before the playoffs is staying focused. They've already proven they know how to do that. Yeah, staying healthy. Staying healthy with any team goes without saying, but just staying focused because they're going to be heavy favorites in every game for the rest of the year.
There are a couple little things I wanted to highlight in the game. And, if you watch ACC Network, they did a recap at the end of the day, and our man Eric McLean, one of our former offensive linemen, gave a game ball to this kid, and that's Amari Rogers, our wide receiver number 3. It is pretty amazing that in spring camp the kid tore his ACL. I mean, blew it out. And here he is, 4-5 months later, and you saw him on, if you watch the game, the one screen pass that he took to the house, like 87 yards. The wheels were on, man. For a guy that blew his ACL, he didn't miss a beat. So hats off to that. That is incredible. The other one was...
well, can I jump in on that, Amari? Rogers, correct me if I'm wrong, is your slot receiver.
He is our slot.
A slot receiver that goes for 30 yards a catch.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, understand, and, give him his 2 scores, caught the ball 4 times, but 30 yards a catch out of the slot. That's impressive minus an injury history.
Yeah.
Just
well,
unbelievable.
And keep in mind,
talent on that team.
You look at our wide receivers, he is the slot and he is awesome and really productive, and those that don't know, he is former national champion and Tennessee quarterback T. Martin's son. And for those that don't know, he played high school ball in Tennessee, and one of the schools that he played against was a team high school that T. Higgins was on. So they became good friends, and actually T. Higgins was named after his dad, T. Martin. Pretty weird.
Little 6 degrees of whatever.
That's right. But Amari had a great day, and T. didn't score, but he went 7 for $150. So you're right. We did it all over the place. The other one I wanted to mention was freshman wide receiver Frank Ladson, number 2, had an amazing catch as he was falling backward. Now, it was a great ball thrown right into the breadbasket from Trevor, but it was the corner of the end zone, and my man was literally falling down backwards with a guy draped on him and makes the catch for the touchdown. Amazing for a freshman.
Yep.
So excited about the future. We are wide receiver U. But, yeah, the ACC took a dump, man. I mean, it's not good. Florida State, I was happy to see your boys put up a little bit of a fight. It was almost a win by a missed extra point again by Virginia. But to be honest with you, brother, and I said it beforehand, like, unfortunately, we needed Virginia to kind of win that game just to show to hold a little bit of face as much as it was. But, we proved that we're a basketball conference this weekend, and that's not great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, here's the deal with FSU, and then I'm going to spend a little more time talking about the winning team because that's more important. Is Florida State they played more competitive, they were a little bit more balanced, and then the fourth quarter happened. And
you got to finish,
and you got you self-inflicted wounds, bad penalties, PIs, personal fouls. The whole thing is, it's at a point where we need to hear less from Taggart about, all these things are correctable. They're not getting rid of Taggart, which unfortunately for me might set this program back significantly from a time standpoint of getting back to the opportunity to get back to relevance. There's no guarantee of that. There is some things you can change in a culture, and one of them is smart, disciplined play, and they're not. For 2 years, they have not played. I get it was 3 years with Fisher, but I'm only talking about Taggart. The Fisher complaints are over. This is on Taggart. We played some younger guys, some guys that showed some stuff. I think
Cam Akers had a decent day again. I don't know if they gave him the rock enough because you saw a week ago they gave it to him like 30 times. He only got it 18, but he had 78 yards.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Akers realistically is a third round at a maximum talent. Meaning this is a guy that probably will be a type of guy that'll go to the combine and up his draft status compared to how bad Florida State is. They don't use him properly in a lot of scenarios. The fact is they're dropping balls. They don't have the desire. There was one play, and it was in the beginning of the game where their linebacker Warner, who was all right in the game overall, but it was real telling to me. So he had overrun the pursuit on the running back. The running back ran past him, went about 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, and then started cutting back. And, you're getting a rear view look at this, and he's walking back. This guy could have made the tackle. He was that close to him. And because the guy had already passed him, it was like, all right, I'm done on the play. And if you go watch a Clemson team playing defenses, it's almost like if I'm not laying on the ground at the end of the play, I didn't do my job because I better be still going after the ball. And that to me spoke volumes about the type of want to that's on that team right now. Taggart telling them to learn how to win. Well, damn it, demand that they win. Demand that they play that way. And they don't. They're also running a lot of guys out of position. Again, we've got safeties playing linebacker and Lars Woodbay, who is totally playing out of position. He's a good thumper, but when he's your best best linebacker, they've actually made a big deal about playing to the 4-3 or the 3-4, and now they're playing to the 4-3, but the problem is they're playing 3 D tackles in a 4-3, which means you're getting absolutely no edge pressure from an oversized lineman. It's just a mess. So anyway, but then on the Virginia side, what I did see was, you brought it up, the running ability of their quarterback, Perkins, is very good. He's a smart player with that. He leaves some to be desired with the passing game.
That's going to be a problem for Virginia moving forward. I mean, you guys won the turnover battle. You had 2 picks, and I don't think you turned the ball over at all that I could see.
Not by handing it to the other team.
The guy went 30 of 40, but it was for 295, so you're talking less than 10 yards a pass, and he had 1 TD and 2 picks. So his game is completely on the ground because he went 12 carries for 46 yards, and that was where he was effective because he's not accurate passer. He's not a great passer.
No,
and it'll be a problem for a guy that might want to try to get a bid into the draft.
Yeah, I mean, he did. I will say this. He hit some clutch throws. There were some very good throws in there. Florida State had the lead going into I think it was the fourth quarter. I think we had the lead. 17-10, and then they scored. We traded touchdowns, and they scored 2 touchdowns, and that was kind of the end. Florida State still had a shot at the end to tie it up. What the hell are they doing? Why are you not spiking the ball and getting into a good set? I keep hearing we had the play. They left Cam Akers out to dry. There had been penetration in the backfield the whole game. It wasn't like they were on the 1-inch line, and he runs. Listen, I just got to say this. NFL and college, like, how many times do we have to watch teams that are getting attacked in the run parallel to the line of scrimmage? It's the dumbest play in football. You run parallel to the line of scrimmage, you better have track star athletes like Clemson that are going to beat the guy to the corner. When you run that as part of your offense, it's a joke. The NFL is even worse, and they still do it. Nobody should be running with their shoulder pads parallel to the line of scrimmage unless you are running trickery with a major speed advantage. And even still, you watch those plays get blown up 50% of the time. But to do it as a game-tying opportunity is baffling. So I guess what I took out of this from Virginia's side was, well, they got the win, and yes, we needed it. They're ranked. I think they're the only other ranked team I think we got in our conference at this point.
They were 21. I don't know where they are now. I can't imagine they moved up too much.
So this was just, it wasn't really an impressive win for Virginia, which is unfortunate, but it is a win. And when it all comes down to it, if they can get on a roll here, which is going to be beneficial for the conference overall, they're kind of the light in the Coastal. I mean, we know, like I said, Clemson stands alone, and that's in the conference as a whole, but certainly in the Atlantic. Because then now as we transition to some of the other games, we thought the UNC Wake Forest game was going to be interesting. And in the end, the final score was interesting. Mm-hmm. But Wake Forest came out and knocked UNC in the mouth, like big time. I mean, they were up, 21-0 at one point?
I think we've talked about him before. Their wide receiver, Surratt, he's a stud, that kid, man. I tell you something. He is definitely, what is he, like 6'4"?
Yep.
230 or something like that. I mean, the kid is enormous. And when you were looking at the secondary for North Carolina, like, it was just a matchup nightmare with the size of this kid. And Wake Forest knew it, and they took advantage. The kid went 9 for 169 TD, but he just looked otherworldly. Yep. Now, his brother was playing on the defense for North Carolina, and his parents are in the crowd, and they interviewed him, and maybe there was a little bit of inspiration there. His older brother, mind you, but, he played out of his gourd. And the Newman kid, the Jamie Newman kid, is really, he's pretty good, man.
He's coming into his own.
He showed some leadership, and he wasn't gaudy. He just did his job, got it done, went to the sideline, and seemed to be like just quietly a positive inspiration and motivator for the team. So, you might see Wake start to creep up there, and maybe they'll make a few waves. So, the problem is again, and I don't mean to gloat, but I mean, it's just Clemson's head and shoulders above anybody else. Yeah. I mean, you got roll through some of the other ones.
Well, just interestingly, you understand. Look at what we're putting as a marquee as the competitive games. They weren't pretty games, but they were competitive games because you go out there and you see some catastrophic losses. Georgia Tech, kind of gets it going in week 2, and you think they can ride a little bit of a high, and they take a dive against Citadel and lose in overtime, which is, I'm sorry.
Now,
it's just,
don't forget, Citadel beat South Carolina a couple years back on their turf, but it's unacceptable.
Was that one of South Carolina's better years?
Nah, exactly. It's unacceptable, bro.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you
pay these teams to play them.
Yeah. Now this one is it's a Power 5 matchup, but after watching what happened to Kansas at home, for them to go to Boston College and just break their foot off in their hind parts, like, embarrassing. Like, I was hoping Boston College was a team that could do it, and then the other team that I thought was in a very similar position as this was NC State. I mean, you've got a West Virginia team. It's got a broken wing. It's floundering.
I thought they were awful, man, and we talked about it. Like, what the heck? They got waxed last week, and you go into this game and think, well, NC State's good enough to take them, and they just they crap themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, and then you got a very, very uninspiring win, but it is a win. So, because again, at the end of the year, there's always that 1 or 2 wins you're going to have on your schedule where you go, eh. But I'm sorry, Virginia Tech 24-17 at home to Furman, a game that they were losing going into the second half. I just
that team's lost, man.
Yeah,
Fuentes
they were losing going to the fourth quarter. I apologize.
Fuentes lost that team. I thought that there would be maybe a minute inspiration from the defensive side of the ball, being that this is Bud Foster's last year, but. Yeah, man, their defense isn't the same. They're sinking ship right now, and you know unfortunately it was a loss. If I'm going to look at our conference and say there was one other game this weekend that might have been somewhat positive, and it was a loss, and that was Pitt to Penn State, because we thought that even though there might be some sort of in-state rivalry there, I mean, the way Penn State was looking, we thought they were going to roll them, and I think at one point Pitt was winning that game, but they kept it close, and Penn State barely won 17-10. But that loss is the only other positive I take away from our conference.
No, I mean, Miami took care of business against Bethune-Cookman, but again, they were 0-2. Louisville beat Western Kentucky, but you know, it was 38-21. It wasn't as convincing as we'd like to see, and their quarterback was out in that game. Juwan Pass was out, so overall, it was just not a good look for the ACC. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time. The only one really we're talking about as far as the playoff picture is Clemson, and hopefully that Virginia can play some better football going forward and maybe make a competitive advantage for this. So now we're going to move on and look at the Big Ten. All right, so if we're going to really kind of grade, ACC gets the 3 piles of poo rating. The Big Ten, overall, we'd say it kind of followed somewhat a less uninspired performance. I guess I'm going double negative there. They had some unimpressive wins and some tough losses, but we'll lead off with who their biggest, I guess, potential for at this point for the college football playoff, which is Ohio State.
Yep.
They did what they were supposed to do. They rolled Indiana. Go ahead and give me a little bit of insight on how you feel about that. Well, I mean,
Fields had another good day. 3 TDs through the air, 1 TD on the ground. Went 14-24 for $199. J.K. Dobbins is definitely gearing back into form. It was, I feel like, a little slow start for a guy that was talked a lot about, potential Heisman candidate. He went 22 carries for 193 in a TD, but I mean, if you watch today of the game, when he got in the open, he was just gone.
Yep.
Just gone.
Yep.
On the flip side, Indiana had put 10 points on them. So, I mean, I think their defense on the Ohio State side is, and keep in mind, like, Indiana's not great, but this is a matchup in past years that could give Ohio State some fits.
Certainly in the first half, they had some rough goes with Indiana.
And, man, I mean, I tell you, it was 30-10 at half. So, and that was the last that Indiana saw of the end zone or the goalpost. So, I don't want to dwell on it too much. I think the takeaway, though, is that's probably for Ohio State fans what you want to see is, we've seen them in past seasons light the scoreboard up, but they let their opponents put points on them as well, and that got concerning. And so, not only did they only just allow 10 points, but 0 in the second half, which tells me they made some great adjustments on the defensive side of the ball that might have not even needed much. So that's my takeaway. I mean, Fields is doing his thing. I mean, I'm still want to see against some really formidable opponents how he does, but he's looking good, and I'm one of the guys that was a little bit of a Fields naysayer, and I might need to retract that. But it's the defense for Ohio State that is probably the best takeaway, because as they march forward, we thought Penn State might give them a run. A little questionable about Michigan. Don't know that they're actually what everybody thinks they are. Yep. At this point, it does. It's starting to look more and more every week If it continues this path, like Ohio State's just going to run the gauntlet in, even when they get to the championship game for the Big Ten. So,
well, I will say this. Unlike the ACC, and this is where I definitely give the Big Ten a bigger leg up overall, is realistically they've got 4 teams that still have a shot at this.
Yep.
Michigan has been uninspired and certainly not looked good. Most people are not up on them as being part of it, but they are still 2-0.
And we'll know more this week.
Yeah, and they have a chance. Now, I will say Penn State had a tough matchup, did not play as well as we'd like to see. It's interesting. Their running game was really going in the first game, and it started to really dwindle over the last 2 weeks. So Penn State's got to right some things in their ship, but they're still very much in it. And I would say the second best team right now, and they were idle, so let's put that out there, was Wisconsin.
Yep.
Wisconsin,
and they go head to head with Michigan.
Yeah, and they look every bit the Wisconsin type team that we're used to seeing.
Correct.
Defense, offensive line, and running game, and they've got the boys to go and do that. Question is, when they get into a close game and the ball has to go in the air a little more consistently, do they have enough balance to be able to win those games? Again, Ohio State looks like the class of it, but there are still teams in it, unlike what I think the ACC really has one team and another team with an outside shot of making some noise. They legitimately have 4 guys, but they all got to play. They got to play each other for the most part, and so it'll get played out on the field, certainly to say. But on the other end, a really hard-charging team that was really up and coming, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Well, absolutely,
they were averaging like 70 points a game.
Yep.
And their running back, I think his name is McDonald, is it? Is it McDonald? McFarland. Has been just outstanding this year.
Yep.
And when Maryland got down on the goal line for the go-ahead, and it's 1st and goal from like the 1, 2, 3 yards, within the 5,
yep.
They decided to run McFarland 4 times in a row. Let me tell you something. If I were a coach, that's what I would have done.
Yep.
I would have done the same thing. And he got stuffed. So poo-poo on Maryland's offensive line for not opening just a little bit of gap for this guy who's a really good runner to make his way to the end zone. And so I don't disagree with going for it 4 times with a run in that close. You squeeze the area for that offensive to work, and it's much harder to throw the ball. And so that was the right move. The fact that they got stopped, and not just that it was Temple. I'm not saying Temple's awful, but come on. I mean, you got to show up for a game like that, and you just, it just kind of went down your leg like dirty laundry here.
Yeah, and I will say I agree with you on all counts, but I want to say something that I think is really important, because this game was lost in my mind through the quarterbacking. And I saw Josh Jackson, who I knew from Virginia Tech, had a Josh Jackson Virginia Tech type performance. 15 of 38 for 183, a touchdown and a pick. Understand you're not going to win football games at 5 yards per attempt, especially when you throw the ball 38 times a game. It became one-dimensional. It allowed Temple to focus, and I don't want to downplay Temple. Temple played a tough game, and this was on the road. I'm not going to go ahead and give them a pass on the fact that Maryland shouldn't have won this game. They definitely should have. They had all the ponies and all the momentum, but just you have to be able to get it done in the air. And I think teams have figured out, Temple's shown a little bit of a blueprint, and the question's going to be, can Josh Jackson revert back to what he did in the first 2 games and start being more effective in throwing the ball? Because it's only going to open up the speed on the run. I mean, understand, you had McFarland go 26 attempts for 132, so over 5 yards a carry with a touchdown. You had Leak come in and spell him at 8 carries for 57 yards, which is 7 yards a carry plus. So that element was there. Now, it didn't work at the end, but the fact is it was the quarterbacking that did that. So, how does Maryland respond to this? Is Loxley able to get them refocused and not have the season start to spiral against? They're going to have, they've got to go out and play Penn State and Ohio State, Michigan. They got to play in that eastern side, so they're going to have their hands full. So that was definitely a tough loss for them as a conference. The other one that was just not really a good showing was Michigan State took on ASU at home. Again, this is kind of the problem with Michigan State and why, even though they won some games, it's hard for me to get up on them. And it's not that I was necessarily down on them, but they had to show me something.
They're just so boring.
This is a game where they had every opportunity. 10-7, you're an 18th ranked team, and you can only put up 7 points at home. Awful.
Yeah, it was. It really was a boring game. I'm pulling it up now. It was 3-0 at half. It was 3-0 going into the fourth quarter.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
there was several officiating calls in this game that were questionable. And if you saw the post-game pressers from both head coach of Arizona State, Herm Edwards, and Michigan's head coach, Mark D'Antonio, both of them made mention of the poor officiating, and I hate to see that, man. But just like in the NFL, which we'll talk about on a different cast here this week, this officiating, the laundry coming out constantly in games, slowing momentum, slowing drives. It changes the complete complexity of where the game is and where it's going, and it's something to be looked at. It was a little bit, the game was slow enough.
Yeah,
we didn't need more of that. But there's the kid for Arizona, the quarterback Jaden Daniels, that was highly touted. Yeah, not a great day. 15-26 for $140. So it's nothing. And I think at one point they even said too that Herm Edwards, the kid, came to the sidelines and he was like, "Everything okay, man? Like, you all right?"
Yep.
And the kid was on probably like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, then what's your problem? Like, go ball, man. Like, what's the problem?" So, and that tells me that also potentially that maybe there was some opportunity that this kid just didn't see. Now, maybe it's because he's a freshman. Maybe it's because of that. But uninspiring game, but good for Arizona State because, another conference that's in flux is the Pac-12. And, Arizona State's holding on down there in the southern part of the conference with a 3-0 record. So, maybe they can build off of that and get better.
Yeah, and just some other scores to touch on that, with some impact. You had Iowa squeaking by Iowa State 18-17.
We highlighted that. That was the old Cy-Hawk Trophy game.
Yep.
And it was actually, if you watched it, it was a muffed punt by the Iowa State returner, and Iowa State fell on it and pretty much ran the clock out. But had Iowa State
Iowa fell, yeah.
Iowa fell on. Had the Iowa State return man fielded the ball, even if he fair caught it, you don't know. They could. Iowa State could have had a chance. You're talking about, I think the ball would have been somewhere near like their 30, somewhere between the 30 and 40 of Iowa State. They were a field goal away from winning, so it wouldn't have taken much. Purdy had a pretty good day. He went 24-34 for 276, a touchdown, no picks. So not bad. Kind of what we expect out of a kid like that. Had they only been able to field that punt, then this could have gotten real interesting. But we had talked about it going in, that this could be a tough game. We thought Iowa looked really good in its first two games going into this, and Iowa State wasn't living up to the preseason potential. But we talked about this potentially being a trip-up game for Iowa, and it almost was.
Yeah, I agree. And just one game we did highlight, and it was more on the just the negative trend for them, and just was a rebound by Nebraska, beating Northern Illinois 44-8. They ran the ball well. Martinez was certainly way more efficient than he was in his last couple of games. But other than that, you had Minnesota eking by Georgia Southern by 3 points. You had Northwestern 30-14 against UNLV. Those were not impressive. Eastern Michigan going to Illinois and beating them 34-31. So just overall uninspired in a lot of these games, which, again, this is the problem with some of these types of matchups are, we'll keep restating it's a non-win for the team bringing in the non-Power 5, the weaker competition if you don't roll. And then worse is it's now set you up for the potential to even lose some of these games, which happened to them. Again, not to the extent in my mind that the ACC took, but ugly nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand that even these FCS opponents, this is their Super Bowl when they come into your house. So yeah, they're going to give you everything they got. And it doesn't matter if you're the number one team in the country or you're unranked. If it's a smaller school going into one of the big Power 5 schools' house to play them, that's their Super Bowl. So they're going to give you everything you got. And if you don't come to play, bad things can happen sometimes. So it's but we kind of left. Ran through the end of the conference, but left discussion on Michigan State, Arizona State. Arizona State pulling out the win for the Pac-12. So let's segue that into Pac-12 conversation. Friday night.
Yeah.
Friday night, we had the mad scientist, Coach Mike Leach, in actually a big game that we both said we were looking forward to. Washington State taking on Houston. It was in Houston. Mm-hmm. And, Derek King, he's a stud for Houston, the quarterback. So it was something that, that was a concern in my mind for Washington State, especially since at this point in time and knowing that Oregon took that loss early, who's going to step up? And they're a team that won the conference last year. And, well, they're 3-0 now. But, it was 14-7 at half, Houston. And they made adjustments, came out the second half, Washington State put 14 on the board, took the lead, and then it was really they traded 10 points each in the fourth. But, my hat's off to Coach Leach, man. I mean, the guy, that's a tough team in Houston that we saw, Oklahoma, they came out strong against, but then midway, end of the second quarter through the end of the game, Houston really outplayed them.
Yep. I agree. I will say this, just to put some perspective on this. Some people might say, hey, you're an undefeated team. You're playing a team, that's 1-1, a non-Power 5 team. I will say Houston to me is the best 1-2 team
you
in
took
football.
The word
right
in my head when you said it. Took the words out of my mouth. I'm looking at this now, and I see their records underneath 1-2, and I'm saying to myself in my head right before you said, man, that is the best 1-2 team in the country right now, Power 5 or not.
I don't want any parts of them. I don't want any parts of Houston. If I can avoid it, I don't want it. So to me, I don't look at this as a ranked team having a struggle. I thought Washington State proved to me they are a better team. I think they're a better team than their ranking at this point.
For sure.
I think they're a dangerous team. You heard me kind of gush about Derek King. It's still there. The only thing I'd like to see out of him wasn't his most efficient game, but I'd like to see him throw the ball a little more. Now, part of the problem is they have some breakdowns, and what he does with those breakdowns is so impressive.
But you can't fault him for it.
No, I think he's a player. They did the right thing. King ran the ball more than anyone. But
I know.
But Carr coming in there, I said that when they played Oklahoma. I said that kid Carr needs more touches, and he did it. He got it done on the ground. It was a battle.
I mean, he had 9 carries for 77 yards.
Yeah,
that's not too bad.
I'd give him the ball more.
Yep.
I think the biggest problem that Houston has is their offensive line is just not consistent enough, and so therefore it kind of gets them out of balance at times. If they had a stronger offensive line, I think this would not only be a dangerous team but a deadly team. So again, I look at this. I think Washington State had a good win. The game was entertaining. It was a match of guys that like to get crafty with their offensive play calling between Leach and Holgorsen, and
there was that little 6 degrees there because we talked about that in the previews. That at one point Holgorsen was underneath Mike Leach, so it was a little bit of matching of wits there, and the mad scientist came through. So kudos to him.
Big win there.
Moving on in the conference, Utah didn't play anybody, but they held their own. And if we're talking about who may come out of the Pac-12, you got Washington State still undefeated, Arizona State still undefeated, Utah still undefeated. Granted, they took on Idaho State, but they did blank them. And I always say, if you're going to take on the lesser teams, you need to take care of business and get it done. It's not run up the score. More so, it's they blanked them on defense. Well, that's the way it gets done. Okay,
Yep.
is if you're going to play them, not only put the points on that you need, but have your defense win the day. And I really think, based on what I'm seeing, didn't catch the game, saw a few highlights, but I think that's and that's that. Quite frankly, that's their strong point. We've talked about it all year. Utah's really good on D, and that's they may not be the high flying air raid Pac-12 team that you're used to seeing,
Sure.
but just like the kind of the mentality and character of their coach, they are stout defensively, and so they took care of their business.
Yeah, and let me just say this statistically, because one of the things that probably gets kind of a little bit hidden in the numbers is Utah had 543 yards, 320 through the air, 223 on the ground, versus only 116 yards, where Utah really kind of could have opened this up a little bigger, as they had 11 penalties versus 1 for Idaho State. So that's the kind of thing that slows down your drives and kills opportunities to score. But, I mean, if you look at this statistically everywhere else, you think this is a much bigger spread on this game. I mean, Huntley was 15-19 for 282 and 3 touchdowns. Their running game was definitely north of 5 yards a carry. I mean, you had Moscow 10 times for 106 and with over 10 yards a carry, and then their next in line, Wilmore, goes 7 for 38 for 54 or 5.4 yards a carry. So again, they were effective and efficient on offense. I think the score was a little bit lighter on their end than we'd expect, and that was the penalties that do that. The Hankies were out again.
Let's see. A couple other teams that took on lesser opponents was Washington and Oregon. They both come out with a win. Jacob Eason looked better in the game statistically, and we have touched on Hawaii because that's who they played, and that McDonald kid. Keep in mind, the kid did go for 22 for 35 for 218 and touchdown, but he threw 3 picks, so that's not good. Eason went 18 to 25 for 262 and 3 TDs. So, pretty efficient, some good yards. He got back to, I guess, what people expected of him. I just don't know that he's the type of guy that can consistently put up that performance. We've already seen that thus far this year, even against lesser teams, that it's just ugly sometimes with him. So, can he stay consistently above average, I guess? I mean, he's certainly not and never has played to the level of his recruiting ranking.
Yep.
But, sometimes that's just the way it is, that these kids are either they get in a system or with coaches that don't know how to develop it, or they're just overrated.
Yeah, and the question with him is going to be, he is going to have to be a big part of some of these games they've got upcoming, and the question is, can he pull the trigger when he's got to? So, that kind of stuff happened. As we mentioned, USC losing to BYU. That's a team that's going to have some hiccups. They're going to have growing pains. I mean, we talked about how they lost their quarterback, JT Daniel, and now they've got, the Slovis in there.
And he looked like a world beater week 1 against Stanford, and we'll touch on that. But, obviously the defense for Stanford is not that good. So it kind of, and so he came back down to earth walking in there against a BYU team, not just playing a BYU team, but playing them on their turf. And, they disguised some things on the defensive side of the ball, and they confused a young quarterback, which is really the smart thing to do if you're a defensive coordinator.
Yep, I agree. And, so, all in all, I will say this too. I mean, we talked about, and Oregon had a big game. I think they were steady to above steady overall as a conference.
Cal pulled out a win. They're 3-0. Who knows what happens? I mean, they beat Washington, wasn't it, last week? I think it was Cal that beat Washington.
Yep.
They did. So, I mean, you don't know what's going to come out of there. You can't really name a superstar on that team or anyone you're like, whoa, this guy's awesome.
Or anyone for that matter.
Anything threatening. So we'll see how that carries. But I guess let's round out the Pac-12 talk about, what we had previewed as good in Stanford, the good guys going against the evil empire that is Josh Heupel and the University of Central Florida Knights.
Heupel. Yeah, that
got ugly. We said what my concern is there was nothing I saw out of Stanford that was explosive, and I knew that's all UCF is, and I knew that at some point in the game you're going to have to try to find that. Now we went into the preview thinking Costello wasn't playing. He was healthy
He did play.
and he did play.
All right, he did play.
Okay, and there were points in the game where they were trying to fight back, and as opposed to being ground and pound like Stanford usually is, they went to the air. I mean, the kid threw the ball 44 times, and that's kind of not their MO. And but he didn't seem like he was trying to make a big play here or there just to explosive, just to catch up and maybe slow down UCF, and it just did not work out.
Yeah, and really Stanford, what is traditional of them is being able to play good defense, and they were down 38-7 at halftime, so they're not built for that big comeback.
They're not the defense that they've been.
This team overall is having a down year for what we have understood them to be for several years. Doesn't mean they can't rebound again. We've talked about how much we love their coach there. It just they've got too many things working against them, and when UCF got out early, I think Stanford's confidence level is down, and you got a team that wants to go out and prove anytime they can play a Power 5 that they can blow it up. It just didn't work.
How do you feel about Stanford grad Tiger Woods sitting on their sidelines, living down there in Florida, and watching that? I mean, that has to be painful. That everybody and their mother in Florida is giving him heck this week.
Well, I mean, Tiger Woods at 44 is Stanford 2019.
Yeah, exactly.
A shell of what they used to be.
But to UCF's credit, like I said, they're a team that's explosive. That freshman kid Gabriel, who I didn't know this, but broke all two his records, I guess, at their high school in Hawaii. Went 22 of 30 for 347 and 4 TDs, and he looked smooth. He looked unfazed. He came on the sidelines. He wasn't too high. He wasn't too low. He wasn't breaking a sweat. But he looked incredible. And I just don't think that's the Stanford defense we're used to. They're having a very down year, and unfortunately UCF has been screaming about playing a big team in their house, and they get it and they demolish them. So they do what they what they are preaching to the world about, make them look as good as everybody. They want everybody to think, and but unfortunately it was a down Stanford defense. But from the box score, nobody's going to really notice that, especially your casual fan. They're going to be like, wow, maybe they do need to be considered. I mean, they're sitting here at, 15 or something like that? They're going to creep up to the top 10 if they haven't already here this week or the next. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at their schedule ahead. They have to play Pitt on the road next week. That won't be much of a game for them. They get Connecticut. They get Cincinnati. They can tend to have problems, and a few weeks later they get Temple. The big one for them is going to be when they have to have Houston, but Houston is coming to them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that actually is going to be a great matchup. And let's see, this is week 3, so 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 maybe. Week 9, if they don't have a bye, if I'm reading this right. Yeah, right, in week 10 maybe. So that'll be a really fun matchup if things stay the course. But UCF, man, I mean, if there's some more turmoil with some of the Power 5 teams in the top 10, there's every year, man. I mean, they're trying to make a case for himself, and I just don't see how they can let him in. But if they roll the table, and say there's, unfortunately Clemson takes a loss in the conference, man, I don't know. And what I hope doesn't happen, but it's starting to seem inevitable because of a team like USC, is an expansion of this playoff.
Yeah. Again, let's see how Stanford finishes the year. It looks on paper, especially to start the year, a much more impressive win, but it could turn out to fizzle. I don't see it. I don't know. It's to me, it's going to be very tough, even with a one-loss team, to compare resumes. I guess you could see it, but it always bears.
But our resume is not going to be that good if the ACC continues.
Yeah, it's probably.
we need A&M to roll, so that helps us because South Carolina isn't looking it.
Yeah, Yeah,
and
that's
no one
true.
in the conference is. So let's move on. That's the Pac-12. We jumped over on our board the Big 12, so we're gonna bounce back to that. You wrote on there big wins from the bottom, which yes, definitely did happen. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably quickly we can go through the two bigger heavyweights in this, which is OU rolled as we expect, more of the
Jalen
Hurts show. And again, against a weak opponent, UCLA has put up minimal fight all season, and they're just a bad football team. But they did what they were supposed to do. Texas,
It was 34-7 at half.
yeah. So Texas took on Rice. Texas, Rice, I believe, was Rice's Army kind of had a tough game with early on.
I know. Before we jump on, I do want to run over this. Hurts was 15 of 20, 289, 3 TDs, ran the ball 14 times for 150 yards and a TD.
Yeah.
He's looking the part. He's looking the part, not just for a Heisman candidacy, but to take his team. And, we heard it on the radio this morning. How great would it be to see Oklahoma, Alabama in the first round of the playoffs?
Sign me up.
Yep.
I want to see it. I want to see it.
I would too. It'll be fun. Yeah. So, yeah, Texas is still in this thing too now.
Yeah. To me, if Texas and Oklahoma play each other, even with Texas with one loss, whoever wins that game, as long as they take care of business from here on out, which is very viable, though they do have it's a solid conference right now. At least it's starting to shape up that way. But if they run the table, they get a seat at the end of the year. I see it. I mean, you cannot knock Texas for that game against LSU.
No.
And I mean, again, they won 48-13 on the road against Rice. Again, not to overplay it, but Rice gave Army all they could handle, and Army gave Michigan all they can handle. And again, it's you can't always compare team to team, but they went out there, they steamrolled them. So the point is, Texas and OU.
It's all we have to go by right now.
Yeah,
so I mean, that's the only thing you can really give comparison to until they really get deep into conference play.
Yeah, and so they did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12, I would say right now, behind the SEC, unfortunately, or I should, let me restate that. Behind the SEC West, I would say that the Big 12 is probably the second best conference out there overall. Yeah, just because they've got two teams in Oklahoma and Texas that are powerhouses. And let me tell you something, man. Quietly, Baylor's sitting over there in the wings, and they could cause trouble too.
Oh yeah, and I think that's kind of where I said big wins from the bottom, meaning the team's not your next tier after your OU Texas, Kansas after a horrid loss to, was it Coastal Carolina?
Yeah,
something like that.
It was
somebody bad. At home, goes to Boston College and lays the wood to them.
PU
and chested it. Yeah, I mean, granted, it's Boston College.
A.J. Dillon still had a game. I'm gonna pull up his stats, but
they put up 48 points on a Boston College defense.
That's typically a little bit stout. Yeah, A.J. Dillon went 20. I mean, he toted the rock 27 times, but he had 151 yards and a TD. So I mean, he was doing his thing. The problem is the quarterback Brown was 18 of 36.
Yeah, for 195, but just they didn't get anything going. And if you look at the flow of the game, Boston College jumped out, but then second quarter, Kansas came out and took it right back from them, and then in the third quarter, put the exclamation point on it. So they just disappeared in the second half in this game. And again, this is just a bad look on Boston College. It certainly gives a little reprieve to Kansas after that loss. And in a similar story, a West Virginia team that's looking terrible in the first 2 weeks goes to NC State again. Another a 2-0 team that had been playing better ball, was keeping their scores low. They had played, I believe, Eastern Carolina and then Western Carolina.
Yeah.
And won those games handily and kept the score down. Gets just steamrolled by West Virginia, 44-27. At least that was on the road, but still no excuse for a score like that against a team with some level of expectation to compete in the ACC. That's just, that's weak. Then you had Kansas State go on the road, take on Mississippi State in the SEC
That was
again.
the game we had talked about, and we touched on maybe because it's big opponents, two Power 5 teams with the schedule we had for this week. That could be interesting, and but I think we both were like, yeah, we don't know. We don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. We just didn't know enough about the teams, and they went out and won it in a tough place to play. And then the last one is just TCU taking on Purdue. Not a marquee matchup, but again, Purdue had put up some serious numbers. Again, we talked about how their quarterback had put up 500 plus yards, and the only other two guys that do that were Drew Brees a couple of times and neckbeard Kyle Orton, but is certainly one of their more prolific passers in Purdue history. And they shut him down to 13 points. So the TCU defense and Gary Patterson, the team got it done. And this is
the one player on Purdue that's kind of their big timer is the receiver number 4, Rondale Moore. Made a name for himself last year. Hasn't really come back to fruition with that. I mean, the guy I think they let him run the ball once, had 0 yards, and he only had 3 receptions for 25. So taking their playmaker out of the game. And I'll revert again back to Baylor just because they've played nobody. They played SFA. What is that? SFA is I can't even remember.
Stephen F. Austin?
Yeah, that's who it is. Stephen F. Austin rolled them in week 1, 56-17. Played University of Tennessee, San Antonio, rolled them 60.
Texas, San Antonio.
University of Texas, San Antonio, sorry. Rolled them 63-14 this past week. They get Rice on the road this week, which I'm sure they'll do the same. And then they get Iowa State coming to their house. That's a team. I mean, Matt Rule, man, he's been able to bring that program out of the ashes from all the nonsense that had gone on there with the predecessor. Watch out, man. They can put points on the board, and there's somebody not a lot of people is talking about that I think very soon as conference play begins, you'll see there's somebody to have to worry about. So I guess I say all that to say is the Big 12 is looking pretty good.
Yeah, I would say they are behind the SEC West. And then also, the Big 12 and the Big 10 probably have the bigger ponies. But the point is to watch the bottom of the conference, elevate that conference with some big out-of-conference wins is huge.
Would have loved that out of the ACC.
Yeah, and we didn't get it done. So good on them. They're looking strong. So now what I think we need to do is move on to the SEC. We'll finish up with them. They get the pub and the hype, and the SEC West certainly deserves that. But we'll start with the first game out in the East was UF. Coming off a loss at home to Kentucky that was not good.
Last year.
Yeah, last year was not good.
It was Kentucky's first win over Florida in, forever.
Yep, and you got a Florida team that's ranked in the top 10. I believe they are 10.
Nice.
I think
the
they
most
fell
overrated team in the country. Sorry, Florida fans. You should know that, though.
I don't know. Maybe Michigan might have them beat.
Maybe.
It's a battle.
Maybe, but I think that'll come to fruition this weekend against Wisconsin.
Yeah, I agree. And in this game, the big happening was two big happenings. Number one, Kentucky having a chance and should have been able to take this game, which, most people were like, all right, UF's coming out for blood and wants this shot. Mark Stoops got his guys up, got them ready to play.
They've got a good defense, man.
Yep, they do.
Just because they lost Allen doesn't mean they don't have other horses on that side of the ball. They've got some guys there that are not bad. Number 32, Jamari Brown, I think he's somebody that will play on Sunday.
Yep. And then so in this game, the other big storyline is the loss of Felipe Franks. People are all over this guy, whether they good or bad or indifferent. Is definitely their unquestioned quarterback, and he goes down with was this ankle or knee? I remember it was in a cast.
It was a leg, but if you saw the play, I mean, it was ugly.
Yeah,
it got bent in the wrong direction. And it was ugly.
Yes.
And I think, I said that Kentucky can win this game. I really believed it. And they had them dead to rights. It was 21-10, was it? It was let's see, 21-10 going into the fourth quarter. And at that point, Florida comes back with 19 unanswered points to win the game. I really thought Kentucky would win, and a lot of that had to do with Felipe Franks. So the fact that when he got knocked out of the game
Offense improved.
The offense improved, and Trask came in, and he was 9 for 13 for 126 yards. It's nothing phenomenal, but he managed the game better than Felipe Franks. He didn't I always feel like Felipe Franks doesn't know what's going on. Is kind of like a deer in headlights. It surprises me because Mullen's a great coach, a great offensive mind, and great with quarterbacks. And Franks has been with him for a little while now, and Mullen has put his faith in him. From the beginning of the year, naming him a starter, saying he's the guy, this, that, and the other. And the guy, you figure that he would get better with a coach like that, and he hasn't. So, in fact, it looks worse thus far this year. And I think the fact that he's gone out might actually help Florida moving forward.
Well, what I think it did is, what I took from this game is I think it got Florida more focused on its strengths, which is understanding you've got to be a good defensive team. Stop having Felipe Franks try to win games. He got in the Miami game, that last interception. I mean, he's good for those types of plays. And what they did was they played a really efficient brand of offense. I mean, understand P. Ryan was 14 for 27 yards. So he was averaging less than 2 yards a carry in this game.
It's nothing phenomenal.
No, and Trask came in, was 9 of 13 for 126 yards. They got some play out of their defense. That really was inspired, and so far, they've been a good defense, but I'm not to the level that they've been talked about, and they put it on.
Yep. This
could be the kind of thing that actually catapults them,
correct,
and makes them a stronger team. It makes them focus on the areas of their game where they're the strongest, and so we're gonna have to see how this plays out because Franks is definitely out for a long time, if not out for good. Yeah. And Trask, I saw this; it popped up on my phone. Says that he hasn't started a game since his freshman year in high school.
Wow.
So his upcoming start will be his first start since he was 15. So that ought to be kind of interesting to watch it play out.
That is interesting. I didn't know that. He was a pretty highly touted quarterback out of high school. How does that happen?
I don't know. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research into that. That's one that plugged just a few minutes ago. So, again, I think it'll be interesting to see how UF responds. This certainly is a challenge for them against teams like Georgia that can put up the score because they are going to have to get in the air. But, again, reminder that they've been out without Tony. They lost the other guy. I'm blanking. They lost another guy, too, as well that is supposed to be back in the next few games. So there's a big happenings in the SEC East. On the SEC East as well, we'll just touch on that Georgia once again rolled. They do look impressive in the sense that they're scoring points. There is this level of I watch them and I feel like there's another gear with the talent here, and I haven't seen them hit that gear yet.
Especially against lesser opponents. Yeah. You'd expect to see that all day.
Yep.
But I question it a little bit. I don't know. We'll see. Here's another thing, and I've mentioned it time and time again about Georgia, is pressure on the quarterback. I mean, they're playing a team in, Arkansas State?
Yep.
Was it? And they only have one. No. I stand corrected. They had more than one sack. So they're starting to get some pressure. It looks like they had 1.5, 2.5,
4 sacks.
3.5. Yeah, 4 sacks. So, yeah. Look, there was one thing off football talk that I really did like, and we were in Atlanta, and there are Georgia fans everywhere, and they're arrogant as all get out. But the idea of doing a pink out, and not just a pink out, you had some of the kids painting themselves, something about, I can't remember, Wendy or something was the Arkansas State coach's wife who died from breast cancer. That is, and even the coach at the end of the game after getting throttled just was almost in tears. That could have been the greatest story I've ever seen out of the University of Georgia and all the arrogance we get from their fans. My hat's off to Georgia. Their fans are programmed for doing something like that.
Yeah.
That was a class act, absolutely called for, and I hope at the end of the year it goes down as a highlight that people remember.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, just to the lengths they went for this, not only the pink out, you had the front row of the student section.
Right.
You had about, I'd have to count the letters, 15 kids putting Remember Wendy on their back and showing that. High class. It's what I love about competitive sports is that moments like this happen and they get, unfortunately, less press a lot of times. than the people that do stupid things. And so this is one, and understand, this was not an older lady. I mean, this is just a tragedy. It was a young coach with a young wife. And a lot of kudos and respect to the Georgia fan base for showing out like that, going out and getting it done. And let me just say this. I love Jake Fromm.
Yeah.
Jake Fromm gets it done, doesn't get the Trevor Lawrence, Tua love of other that those guys get, and quietly goes out there and
the
just
reason
tears it up.
That 5-star Jacob Eason and 5-star Justin Fields left the program. This kid
he chased him out.
I'm excited to see him on Sunday, and he will be on Sunday, my friend, just because he's a gamer and he's got attributes that you cannot coach. I repeat that. He has attributes inside of him, totally void of athleticism, that you cannot coach. And it's all upstairs. And the kid's got a great head. He's got a great head for the game. He's smart. He's a student of the game. And yes, he's a good manager of the team. But when he's called upon, he can perform as well, and he doesn't crack under pressure. I love Jake Fromm.
Yeah, and you can see it. Go back and watch him play Alabama in the title game. Yeah. Like he just
unfazed.
The kid shows up. So all in all, a good look for them.
And Tennessee got their first win.
Yes,
Hail Rocky Top. Good for you.
And they beat Tennessee, Chattanooga.
Oh, hey, it's a rival. It's a W is a W is a W.
Yep.
Look, they needed it because it ain't going to get any easier going into conference play. So if they had somehow dropped that game, which after what we saw with their first 2 starts, it wouldn't surprise anyone, I guess. So it was really necessary. I don't think that takes away from the fact that Pruitt's on the hot seat. Again, they are going, and I don't want to call it a gauntlet because, again, I don't think the SEC East that good. Don't think it's that good.
Yeah.
Don't.
They just haven't shown themselves
but
to be terribly
they're going to have
competitive until
problems in a conference that's not, in that the division of the conference that's not that good, just because they're not that good. So we'll see. But
and they get Florida next week. So
we'll
see. A good win.
Yep. Where is that game?
In Florida.
It's in Florida. Okay.
Yep.
So, but good for them for getting their first win. So now let's dive into the best division of the conference in college football, being the SEC West.
Yep.
They were really lesser teams, but once again, you play lesser teams, you take care of business. Those teams did.
And I will kind of sum up LSU, Alabama, A&M, and Auburn in a couple of words. Everybody wins.
Ass whooping.
Yeah.
I will say, I'm going to pull it up really quick. LSU played Northwestern State, and we're like, who is that? Where are they from? I was like, got to be in Louisiana, so maybe it's a quasi-rivalry. And, after the first quarter, it was 7-0, or 7-3. Northwestern State Demons. And then, at the end of the first half, it was 24-14 LSU, so they turned it on. But, that happens. Maybe a slow start. Coming off of a huge win at Texas, just getting their bearings together. Burrow had another good day in my mind. I mean, he was very efficient, 21-24, 373 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick, but 21-24 is as efficient as you can ask, and 373 is pretty darn good on that 24 passes. So I think in terms of people talk about him for the Heisman, whatever, he's still rolling there, and there's still somebody that is going to give Alabama a game. But, outside of that, nobody really played anybody. Alabama
played South Carolina.
Alabama played South Carolina.
South Carolina gave him a little bit of work early in the game, but again,
they did put 23 on him.
Yeah.
Again, you want to take care of business. I know it's in conference. You're talking about a South Carolina team I don't think is very good. You're talking about a backup quarterback in Helinski in the game against, the all-pro defense that is Alabama. Yeah, so, I just, you'd kind of, I say take care of business. Yeah, it's a divisional foe, but conference foe, but 23 is, I guess, against the number 2 team in the country, against a less than stellar opponent, maybe more than I'd like to see, Alabama give up on their defense.
I mean, I'll say this.
It was in South Carolina, I guess.
So South Carolina put up 459 yards. Alabama did most of their damage through the air, so that's something we've kind of questioned is the running game. I mean, Tua went 444, I think, but also, total was 495 through the air and only 76 on the ground. Again, they got it done. I would say this game was not really in doubt much past the first quarter.
No.
Just the way the balance was going.
Yeah,
Alabama had a lot of penalties.
24-10 at half.
Yeah.
Well, and you're right on the running game. But one thing I will say about Alabama's running game, and I've talked about Najee Harris. He is a man amongst boys. The guy's enormous. I've seen him face-to-face right in front of me after the national championship. Coming out of the locker room, the dude is a hoss. And there was one play. He went 7 for 36, so nothing spectacular. But there was one play where he trucked some guy after he got the ball. And then after trucking that, he had like 2 or 3 defenders like coming at him like very close. And he just... I mean, it's a highlight reel play. He scampers into the end zone. It just when he trucked that one guy. I mean, I'm surprised the dude got up. And even if he wasn't hurt, I might have just laid on the ground saying, listen, I'm done for the day because I don't want to have to face that again at any point today.
Yeah, yep.
So that was what I expect out of a Najee Harris, like the type of running he ran with reckless abandon running people over.
And let's just also, in highlighting him, I mean, he had 5 catches for 87 yards and 2 scores. So
that might actually been one of them.
Been one of the passes.
One of them, yeah.
I'll say this, what it does make Alabama even more dangerous. Jerry Jeudy has looked like a one-man band almost. He just can do everything. In this game, he was 6 for 68. But, I mean, then they spell him with Devonta Smith, who goes for 136 and 2 scores. And then Ruggs, oh, my God. Well, he caught a ball, and it was like shot out of a cannon.
Yep.
Guy is so fast, and he gets 6 for 122, and an 81 of that was in one score where he literally just outran the entire backfield on a quick little, I guess it was like a somewhat shallow in, and it was just like he just ran through the safety in another corner and was gone.
Yeah, I mean, Jeudy, 6 for 68, no TDs. Is like, I mean, like the fact that these other, and then the other guy that we've seen perform all year with Jeudy is Jalen Waddle. He only had 1 grab for 12. Yeah. So, it's very much kind of like the mantra of Clemson. Like if something's not working, other parts of the team need to step up, and sure as shit did. Here's one thing though. I mean, like, if anybody's going to get to Alabama, and we showed a lot of it in the national championship game. I mean, Tua ran the ball probably on broken plays for 2 times for negative 12 yards. So, you get him uncomfortable, man, and it can cause problems. So that seems to, he needs to look. He threw the ball 36 times for 444 yards and 5 TDs. So I'm not going to complain about 2 rushes for negative 12.
And South Carolina didn't make him uncomfortable.
No, not at all. But that's how you get to him is make Tua uncomfortable, and then everything else should fall into place from there. If you could stuff the run and make him uncomfortable, that could cause problems.
Yeah, again, they got it done. That was the toughest competitor of the 4 big timers. I guess I'd wrap this all up and say, like, even though when we recap this week, we talked about how there was some really weak matchups overall compared to some other weeks. But that being said, that's why you watch and see these games. And unfortunately, this is the type of week where more bad scripts get written than good scripts when you play. And we saw that. We saw some surprises. And now teams we were feeling good about, we're not so sure about. Some teams we thought were left for dead or not dead anymore.
Yeah. Maybe some and some surprise teams that we may still need to learn more about. But, they are undefeated and in their conference, and we'll see what happens moving forward. But again, 18 to 22-year-old men, dude.
Yep.
I mean, anything can happen any given week. That's why coaching in college is imperative. It is imperative.
Yep.
So, pretty interesting week. Looking forward to talking about week 3 as we have some more bigger matchups that'll hit the marquee. But it was definitely one of those weeks. I can't say that I didn't expect to see something to raise an eyebrow out of a boring slate of games, if you want to say that, but it was all right. It was all right. So that'll wrap up week 2 recap. Week 3 3. We are on week 3 already. College football recap. We'll get into the preview for week 4 very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Dave, take us out.
All right, check us out. Send us some questions on Facebook if you'd like, because we'd like to answer them. And you guys all have a great week.